In the first lesson, we clarified that serial murder, mass murder, and spree killing are not the same structure of violence. Now we move beneath definitions and ask a deeper question. What psychological processes can move a person toward extreme violence? This lesson is not about mythologizing offenders. It is about understanding mechanisms. The first principle is simple. There is no single cause. Extreme violence develops through an interaction of personality, environment, life experience, emotional pressure, and opportunity. We begin with motivation. In public discussion, motive is often reduced to a simple label. But psychologically, a motive is more than a word. The real question is not only what the motive is, but what function it serves. Does it regulate humiliation? Does it restore a sense of order? Does it discharge internal tension? Does it transform grievance into permission for violence? This is why motivation must be understood functionally, not superficially. Two offenders may both appear angry, but anger may function differently in each case. In one person, anger may be explosive and disorganized. In another, it may be rehearsed, structured, and connected to grievance over time. This brings us to fantasy. Fantasy is not simply imagination in the ordinary sense. In forensic psychology, fantasy may function as an internal rehearsal space. It may allow the person to rehearse power, revenge, domination, punishment, or control. Fantasy can compensate for reality. A person who feels rejected, weak, invisible, or chronically frustrated may create an internal world where those states are reversed. Helplessness may become power. Shame may become domination. Resentment may become punishment. Repetition matters because what is rehearsed again and again may begin to feel less impossible. But fantasy does not automatically lead to violence. Many people experience disturbing fantasies and never act on them. The issue is what happens when fantasy becomes repetitive, emotionally central, regulating, and increasingly linked to action. In some offenders, fantasy also creates an internal script. That script becomes important when reality disrupts it. Another major mechanism is internal tension. Not every offender is driven by elaborate fantasy. In many cases, the dominant process is chronic emotional pressure. As tension rises, thinking may narrow. Neutral events may be interpreted as insults. Ambiguity may be experienced as threat. Rejection may feel not merely painful, but annihilating. In some individuals, psychological options begin to shrink. Action begins to feel more available than restraint. But intense distress does not by itself produce homicide. Many people experience severe emotional strain and do not become violent. What matters is how distress is interpreted, what meaning is attached to it, and which behavioral options feel available. Control is another recurring theme in extreme violence. Some offenders are drawn not only to violence itself, but to the experience of domination. Control may reduce anxiety, impose order, silence resistance, or reverse earlier helplessness. In psychological terms, domination may function as a temporary repair of inner instability. This may appear through subtle behavioral features, controlling pace, restricting movement, prolonging interaction, or reacting strongly to resistance. Resistance is especially important. When reality no longer follows the offender's internal script, the need for control may intensify or collapse. But fantasy, tension, and control do not fully explain extreme violence unless we also consider restraint. Most people possess internal barriers against severe violence. In some offenders, those barriers weaken gradually. Repeated grievance, repeated fantasy, rationalization, emotional desensitization, and hostile beliefs may all contribute. This erosion often begins not with action, but with thinking. The offender may minimize harm, externalize blame, redefine the victim, or build a private logic in which violence becomes understandable. Then, understandable becomes justified, and justified may eventually become necessary. This brings us to escalation. Escalation does not always mean that every act becomes more extreme. Sometimes, escalation means that the threshold for violence becomes lower. Behaviorally, the offender may take greater risks, use more force, shorten intervals, or become more confident. Psychologically, the offender may spend more time in violent ideation, feel less remorse, or require stronger stimulation to achieve the same emotional effect. But escalation is never automatic. Some offenders pause, change method, stop, or de-escalate because of fear, surveillance, age, life changes, or internal disruption. So, this lesson gives us a framework, not a single formula. In the next lesson, we will use typologies to compare offender patterns more precisely, without reducing them to myth.